audio and visual podcast, a weekly discussion about all things guitar building and some random tangents as well, featuring members of the Guitar Builders Collective from all around the world.
Turn on
The Guitar Builders Collective is a like-minded group of individuals that have come together to share their experiences, knowledge and inspiration for guitar building. Each week you can join us in the live YouTube chat or catch up at a later point. It's also available as audio where you'll miss out on seeing our lovely faces and some of the visuals we share along the way. You can also find the Guitar Builders Collective via our forum, over on Instagram where we share images of members' builds. We've got a thriving Facebook group, and we do hope that no matter what your experience and knowledge is, you'll become a welcome member of this community too.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Just before we start, I wanted to quickly say it's nearly the end of November, and a few members of the Guitar Builders Collective have been doing Movember and raising money for charity. And as always, we like to, when people are raising money for charity, mention it. So in the description for this video, I've got links from the Movember account for, we've got Franklin Guitars, we've got Saul Guitars, we've got Nissa Guitars, and we've got Ravencroft Guitars. And hopefully they'll all have some pictures of their magnificent moustaches coming out soon. But, I'm not sure how magnificent they all are. I spoke to Nissa Guitars yesterday and he said quite untamed. So intrigued. But yeah, so today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to start doing every now and then, instead of just having a guest on, we're going to have a theme to the show. And that gives us an excuse to also bring back past guests to focus in on something in particular. And today we wanted to talk about what it's like to teach guitar building and guitar making. Unfortunately, Glyn, Mr. Glyn's Pickups, who has lots of experience of guitar teaching before he moved into doing guitar repairs and pickup making. He lives, as he describes, at the end of the world, and he's got no internet at the moment. So unfortunately, he can't join us. But joining us today, we have got a return guest. It's Sean from Arran Lutherie, who also teaches at Crimson Guitars. A couple of weeks ago, we had a couple of students that had done a course there, and I know in the chat, there's probably going to be a few people as well. We've got Brad from BB Guitars. Now, hello. Brad, by the way, I put links to Crimson Guitars in the description. I've also put a link to where Brad teaches, which is the Guitar Room. Is it called the Guitar Room, Brad?
Yeah, the Guitar. Yep, in Kilmore.
In Kilmore, yeah, fantastic. And we've got Arran, who, like me, doesn't actually teach guitar building, but Arran is a teacher. Arran, how long have you been teaching for?
22 years. Yeah, all at the one school, and I teach the older kids, the teenagers age 12 to 18.
Fantastic. And nothing to do with building or making, as we've heard before.
No woodwork and no music. But yeah, I kind of like keeping that separate, keep the hobby separate from the day job, from a school point of view anyway.
That's fair enough. And I also don't teach guitar building, and I'm not a qualified teacher, but I've worked in education for 26 years now, and that is a mix of, it's mainly art education. So what I do is about teaching people about art, how to make art, but generally I teach teachers on how to help their students express creativity and be more creative. So let's just get a quick overview actually of what Sean and Brad do before we get into sort of more in-depth things. Sean, I know you've been on the show before and we talked about how you got into teaching, but can you give us a quick overview of how that worked?
As you mentioned, I work in Crimson Guitars. I've been there almost 4 years now, actually, funny enough. It's it's really flown by. I'm basically the lead teacher, the head teacher there. So I kind of, not that I keep everything under control, but I try not to let it get on fire, basically. So before that, I had my own business in Ireland, doing mainly repairs, building, and other such things. I'm not a trained teacher in any way. I think I've always had a knack for it, but that only gets you so far, I guess. In Crimson, I think we're one of, if not the biggest by volume schools in the world, where we take on probably about 300 to 400 students a year. So if you bring that out to 4 years, that's well over 1,000 guitars that I've been kind of part of, which is
amazing.
Yeah, it's mammoth, really, and crazy to think about. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
And just quickly with the teaching, there's different courses that you run at Crimson. So there's a 5-day one.
Well, we start all the way down to 1 day, which would be your general setup. So that's just going through, making sure everything's working correctly on that, and then 2 day, which is fretwork, refrets on a 3 day, and then the actual building courses start at a 5 day, which would be your build a classic telly style thing. It goes right up for a 6 day, 2 week, right up to the 3 month course, which is a kind of our headline act, as it were. And that's really that's your kind of your career changer, or you want to get into guitar building professionally. And it's a lot more in depth as well as other things. Yeah, it's just generally a good course. We usually we run the 3 month course 3 times a year, and we usually get kind of 3, 4, 5 students at a time on that, and they stay with us. We build 3 guitars. We set the aim to build 3 guitars. Some people will only build 2. Some people will go up to 5 or 6. It depends what kind of guitars they want to build, how well they take to it, because of course everyone takes to guitar building in particular, I think, quite differently. Some people are very slow, very methodical, and they might come up with something great at the end that's just immaculate. Other people might, be a bit faster, and so some people you get that are absolute precision and super quick, and they're the guys that will pop out 5 or 6 guitars and they'll all be fabulous. And we all get a little bit jealous of them.
So much to talk about. So we're going to circle back round in a minute, because some of the things that so just if anyone's listening and wondering what we might talk about later, definitely want to talk about the types of students that come and why they come and do guitar teaching. Definitely want to talk about what the difference is in the types of courses. Like if someone's doing a long-term course, like you said, that might be a life-changing or career-changing course. And then I'm sure we can talk a bit about our approach to how we teach and things like that. But Brad, can you just tell us a bit then about how you got into the teaching? Because again, you've been on and talked about it before. You're a regular, but maybe you can just explain a bit about the courses you work on as well.
Yeah, sure. So the way I got into it was I was doing an acoustic building course at the Guitar Room. And just got to know the bloke there, Rod, who owns and runs the show there pretty well, and I showed him a few of my electric builds that I had done, and he was pretty happy with what I was able to build, and the acoustic that I built, and we played with the idea of can we turn this into a 7-day-a-week show there, instead of he wasn't operating all days. And I'd pick up the slack and take on some electric building students. So, we just put it out there, and it's been a slow start, but we've had a few students pop through this year so far, and hoping to get a few more through next year. But it all worked out very well for me in the end to go from a course to picking up a little bit of a side hustle there.
Great. So if I'm right, then the Guitar Room's established, but with acoustic instruments. So
primarily acoustic. Yeah, and they've been doing that for like 19 years or something like that. So yeah,
right. And obviously, you've had your experience of electric building. So I think there's something that's common, maybe to all of us, not just us on the screen, but presumably people listening or watching. Most people listening or watching are interested in guitar building, or have built guitars before, or are thinking about building guitars before. I'd be intrigued if there's anyone listening or watching that isn't into guitar building but is listening for other reasons. Like I just like listening to people talking about building and making things personally. But anyway, so we've all got that sort of background experience. And if I'm right, Sean, was it through the Great Guitar Build Off, Ben from Crimson had seen your builds and seen the way you teach through your videos, and that's one of the things that, as well as the quality of your building, that inspired him to ask you along to be part of the team?
Yeah, very much so. So they, I believe, have been looking for a teacher and someone to eventually come into the kind of lead teacher role for a little while, I believe. And something about my videos, I guess my default setting is kind of explain what I'm doing and kind of teach as I go. So I guess they just kind of liked that and ran with it. Yeah. And I'm still the only one to be offered a job through YouTube at Crimson. So.
Amazing.
I have that.
Place to share your CV.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just talk a bit about that, because I know a number of the people that do watch this also have YouTube channels where they will share what they're making. And sometimes when they're sharing what they're making is literally just the process of the building. But sometimes they're, like I do, focusing on certain elements and teaching how to follow through that yourself if you're doing it. And that could be anything. So like, for example, Sean, the other day I set up my bandsaw using your bandsaw video, because I'd heard some people mention how good your bandsaw setup video was, and I went back at it, and it's I would say I've watched quite a few bandsaw videos in the past, and I don't know if it's just because you're talking about it from a guitar making point of view, which shouldn't make any difference to how you set up a bandsaw, but it was easily the best one for me to follow.
That's
so I just
great to hear.
Yeah, no, it's great. Everyone should check that out. Definitely links to everybody's.
It's on the list to watch a good bandsaw video to learn that properly. So there we are. I'll be watching that one next.
Yeah, I've definitely used that one in the past myself as well.
There we go. Owen said he shared that bandsaw setup video with people in Makerspace.
Fabulous. No, I appreciate that.
What is it do any of you think, not necessarily with what you make, but when you're watching online, that makes a good video for teaching or for learning from? We'll get into actual physical teaching in a minute.
Yeah, for me, because I've been thinking a bit about over the last week or so leading into this. Initially, I think there's a difference between a video that shows like a well-edited bit by bit. So this is the process. You don't need to see the whole thing. You just need to see the start of it, and then a few examples, and then kind of the end. So part of it, I think, is that. But when I was kind of thinking back to the type of videos that I was watching to learn from, it was the early Crimson ones where Ben was doing the 12-hour builds and the 24, whatever, all of those series of the timed hour builds. And I think in the early days for me, that was really beneficial because you saw everything. It wasn't like an edited, here's the start of the process. It was every little bit. So you sort of saw how long it took to do every process, even though it was a time thing. So he was trying to do it quickly. So for me, I think that early on, and probably for maybe a lot of people in the community, they were really beneficial because you saw the whole process from start to finish, including any shortcuts that might have been taken. And I know when I was building my first few guitars, they were the videos that I would go to and find the spot that Ben was up to and where I was up to, and then probably following on from then, it's really the really specific edited videos that just shows the exact detail of what you need, and you can watch it for 2 or 3 minutes, and then okay, I can go off and do that part as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with you. For me, when I was first watching on YouTube, I was already making guitars and customizing guitars, but when I was first watching YouTube, the thing that drew me into watching them, and it's partly because I had time, it was during lockdowns and things, were videos like Ben's, who had those long builds, because I found them really interesting to watch, almost therapeutic. But whenever I needed a tip or some advice for how to build, I would do a Google or a YouTube search for a specific thing. And then for me, there are certain things that I always found useful, which was to watch as many videos as I could, because people had different methods. And one of the great things about the internet was being able to see all those different methods, which I'm sure we'll talk about when we're talking about how we teach in person. Can you teach that many methods? But then I could sort of think, is this the sort of method that works for me with the equipment I've got, or do I want to try that out? And often that would be because of the person that's making the video and the way they made it and the way they talk, that I kind of connect to them and feel like that's the way I would work. And once I'd followed someone once with one of their processes, often that would be my go-to. So, for example, when I very first started doing anything guitars, it was setups, and there were just a few really thorough setup videos that I followed. And what was good about them is they went through step by step, very clearly in an order, with very detailed, this is what you do, this is what you don't. And it was just, I could keep going back to them until it became ingrained.
Sorry, I've got to wiggle my screen around for a bit. That's my. I've just gone to battery saver.
If anyone's watching in the future, maybe in the YouTube comments or even on the audio podcast comments, you can leave a comment of some people you might recommend that you think are good online teachers.
I was going to say, I think it's definitely those big deep dive videos that, people like Ben and everyone did, back in the day. And, some people still do them. Someone like Equendor, and he's, very extremely thorough in the amount of detail and that sort of live time play by play as you do it. They're really critical for someone trying to learn the skill set rather than, necessarily just, here's one I prepared earlier sort of style, tuition. It works for some people, but for someone getting into it, and seeing that, the exact process, it makes it feel more possible for anyone because they're actually seeing it come from, idea to application right through to the finished product, and then later on as you go on, you don't need those big deep dives as you learn more and more, so you can shift to those, smaller, here's one I prepared earlier style videos and get, maybe more ideas out of that. But like you say, shopping around and trying, many different people's approaches is fantastic. There's so many out there for us to just grab off YouTube or off a forum, whatever. Someone's always got an idea that you hadn't thought of trying before and, might resonate with yourself more. Some people, they might not gel with, someone's teaching method or approach on, on the videos that they have, but someone else is there, absolute bag of gold for them. So they roll with them and, it's great to have that variety as the community grows.
When I was learning as well, because I'm completely self-taught, I did that exact kind of approach of try and find as many sources as humanly possible for whatever I'm doing, and then kind of look at what tools I actually had, and if I can figure out based on what other people are doing, can I do that? Is it possible? And do I think it'll work well? Because there's a lot of people out there with really sketchy ways of doing things, which is the other downside. You always get some absolute lunatic doing something just unnecessarily complicated or dangerous or something, that was the problem that I found when I was learning myself. Because, like kind of one good example I think I have was doing scarf joints. I used to use a miter saw for doing that, not a sliding miter saw that has the extra capacity or anything, but because of the angle of a scarf joint, I had to rig up this fence that stuck out at 90 degrees from the other fence. It was, looking back, it was the worst possible way to do that job. And I don't know where I got that idea from exactly, but I should not have been looking there because that was extremely unsafe, if nothing else, just with the way it was rigged up, because I couldn't actually reach in to hold the saw properly. So you kind of had to acrobatically hold the neck and hold the saw, and it was awful. But
it's one of those things you do out of necessity.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, but the way I do bandsaws, or the way I do scarf joints now, is with a bandsaw. You cut it and then you plane it till it's flat. And there was a bandsaw right behind me when I was doing this. But I was trying to get a glue-ready surface straight off the cut, which is, as I've progressed, I've kind of learned that there's no such thing as glue-ready off the machine 90% of the time. Maybe not 90%, but a lot of the time. And just embracing that whole thing of roughly do it with something there and make it good later. I found that approach much easier and much more accessible most of the time.
Oftentimes, the approach that seems the fastest is never, in the end, the fastest way of getting there.
Yep.
As I'm sure when you're in person with someone, you get to ask those questions and interact, and you also know if you're going to a school to learn that you're going to someone with pedigree, whereas, like you said, on YouTube. And I found this particularly in Facebook groups and forums, when someone asks a question, the responses often just seem to be totally made up. But then I feel like someone that's making a comment about how to fix this problem on a guitar or how to do this certain process that's putting certain information in. That must be how they do it. They can't just be making something up. And then you see so many varied comments, and then you see people calling out the earlier comments where someone's got in there and said, definitely use this particular acid on your finish to get it shiny. And someone said, no, don't do that. It's weird. The internet's weird like that. But I do find Sorry, I was saying Facebook I find is particularly bad for that. That can be an app. Some of those groups can be, I don't want to call them cesspits, but some of them can be pretty bad, the comment sections. Where exactly that, you get arguments and you get people with the most harebrained ideas. And yeah, like you say, you wonder. You do have a Facebook group which is full of people that are very sensible to give you support, not harebrained ideas.
Yeah, and there's so many things where you do get the comments that start off with, I think this would work well. And it's like very obvious they've never done it, they've never tried it, and they've just sat there for 10 seconds and gone, that might do it. And yeah, I don't, that's one thing I don't like about Facebook groups. They're very entertaining though. And sometimes you do get ideas from them that's like, actually, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, of course, because there's definitely experienced people out there. One of the things I found online of watching people is you can sometimes tell how good the advice is going to be by the quality of what they're building, which I'm sure is what came across, Sean, with you for Ben when he saw your work and the way you're teaching. So even if their YouTube channel isn't a massive channel with lots of followers, they might be just really good at something. But quite often I find that if someone's got lots of followers, lots of interaction, they're probably pretty good at it. A lot of the people I follow on YouTube are not necessarily guitar builders, but they're people to do with DIY that have massive followings and lots of experience, who do those really deep dives into how to sharpen your chisels or how to maintain your equipment. And that I feel like some of the people I'm watching there, I'm properly learning from them. Like, so it's a real lesson with someone with lots of experience who wants to teach. But then you never know. Like I remember Brett Morehouse from Luthier for Builds. He doesn't seem to make much on YouTube anymore, but his videos weren't necessarily teaching. So he didn't necessarily say, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. It was just videos of him working, nicely edited with him playing music over the top. And you could learn so much just from watching his builds because his skill level was really high. And you could just learn from watching how he does something so intricately and neatly that this is how it should be done, or this is one way to do it.
That's the difference too, I think, with a lot of the videos, whether it's a verbal explanation, so someone showing, explaining a process, or the other type where it's just the visual. So seeing what's done with good angles and good close-ups. And I think they're two very different videos, and they both have a place. And I think one of the things that when I kind of think of my own teaching background, it's something called it's called the gradual release of responsibility. That it's I do, we do, you do. So as the teacher, I'll do it first. I'll demonstrate. I'll explain. I'll show you the knowledge or the skill that we're going to look at. Then we'll do it together. So in smaller groups or with the teacher, we kind of do it together. And then when they've mastered that, it's on the you do. So they're doing it themselves. And one of those things I think with a lot of us learning via YouTube and video is that there's really good I do. We see the teachers making the video, the explanations, the close-ups, all that kind of stuff. And then we just jump to the I do. And that's one of the problems in school as well, that you actually need that we do step. So where a lot of people can watch the videos and jump straight from the teacher doing it to them doing it. It's that we do step that we often, are going to miss in the middle, and that's where that gap is filled by the Facebook forums and hopefully, in a positive way by the things that we're doing with this live stream. And I'm sure, Sean, when you've got students in there that they're learning a lot from each other as well, when they're looking at each other's progress and getting the feedback from each other. And kind of comparing where they're up to. So I think it's that we do together bit that's really important, and I think that's where learning from a guitar teacher in person has a real benefit.
So on that, Sean, presumably the way you can interact with your students is obviously going to be different on a 5-day to a 3-month course. But with any of the processes, is there a sort of a way you would do it? Like, do you demonstrate and then they do it, or do you work with them on their particular, say, neck and shaping it, and then they carry on? Is there a sort of methodology that's the same for all parts, or is it different depending on the part of the build?
So our kind of methodology is fairly standard across the board, really. There are certain processes that we kind of say, this might take a bit too long, or this might be quicker if kind of, we the teachers take it and sort it out. I think angled headstock necks are a great example of that, because the way we start with a thick billet, we slice the angle off, and then we, if you're on a 3-month course, we give you a hand plane and say, make it straight and flat. And if you're on a 5-day course, well, you wouldn't do an angled headstock. If you're on a 6-day course, we'll take it next door to our large horizontal sander, and we just kind of sand it, basically. And that takes 5 minutes, as opposed to some people can take 3 or 4 hours to plane it flat, depending on how well they got on with the plane, and I guess how sharp the plane is at that time. And so there are variations like that, but for us, it's predominantly time-based, because 5 days isn't an awful lot of time, for example, and there are certain things that need to be done, and we do try and limit them out so that there's not, because we don't like, for many reasons, to take a student's work and just do it. It's not, I find people don't learn very much from that, and it's just, it also puts time pressure on us, which we usually, if we've got a room of 10 people, we can't be building 10 guitars for people. So, but as I think Arran had a great concept there with the I do, we do, you do. That's quite interesting. I'll be definitely thinking about that a lot more. I think that's quite good, because we usually do an I do side of it. I'm thinking of fretwork here. There's usually the I do, and then there's usually a do the next fret for me, and I'll watch you doing it. And then it's usually a correction of hold the file like this, or rotate it like that, or go a bit further like this. And then it's a case of, right, you've got it, away you go. And that kind of release, I guess, to the you do. But then we always, as the teachers are in the room, we're kind of keeping an eye on them, and there is usually a kind of a going back to the we do stage, I guess, as it were.
And that's part of it, that some people can just do that jump. They can see something and they've got the skills, and obviously people are probably coming to you with varying woodwork skills and tool skills. So that's part of the challenge of teaching, that which students or which kids can jump quickly, and then which need that extra support and a bit more feedback. And obviously, you've said with the time, and I'm the same thing with class time and how long you've got to do something, that I'm sure you've got a balance between letting them do the things they need to do, and then you doing the bits that you need to do, so they do finish the week or the course with a finished guitar, or something that they can almost finish, that they can finish themselves, rather than leaving and then they've got steps to go that they wouldn't be able to do independently.
Yeah, that's something we absolutely try to avoid. We don't like people leaving with unfinished guitars, because if it's half finished and they go home and they guess for the rest of it, what they end up with is something that might be not quite up to scratch to what we want them to be at. And they might pick out, they might pull out this guitar, in an extreme case, I guess, that might not be very good, and say, I built this at Crimson Guitars, and from I guess a selfish point of view, we don't want that either, because we don't want people to go, it's not very good though, is it? So it's a mean thing to say, but it's a consideration, and it's a mindset that kind of helps us to make sure that people finish on time, that they get, if nothing else, that they get the best value from us possible, because that's where the proposition is, isn't it? They're there to learn, or to get a guitar, or whatever it is.
So presumably, because obviously if you're teaching to a time limit like that, having a good plan or a routine that you follow is quite important. So do you have set goals that this needs to be done in this order by this amount of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a course program that we kind of follow, which are basically all the steps in order. And these have been thought through meticulously. I get very stuck in my own head with stuff like that, and I like to, for my own builds as well, I like to have exact steps, and I always think 4, 5, 10 steps ahead and make sure, hey, if I do this now, am I going to screw myself later, basically? And so because that's always a big consideration, because those not having the correct order of operations is going to cost you huge amounts of time. And we've also we set deadlines effectively of by Monday you should have this done, or else we're in trouble. By Thursday, if that's not done, we're in big trouble. And so all of the teachers in the room have these kind of goals in our head, and we all so we can look around the room at a glance, and within 2 minutes we can assess 10 people and go, yeah, they're all fine, they're working well, they're ahead of schedule, they're on time. Maybe this person is lagging, we need to kind of crack the whip with them a little bit more, which does happen sometimes. But we've designed the courses as well at this stage so that they are very basically for what you do on the course is appropriate to the time frame, if that makes sense. It sounds really simple when I say it out loud, but if someone turns up and they want to do a Les Paul, we're not even going to consider a 5 or a 6 day course with them, because that's just not fun for anyone, and nobody wants that. So we do a fair amount of pre-planning. We've got one of the guys in the school, James, he does an awful lot of kind of gatekeeping before anyone gets there, and we know we've got spec sheets for exactly what they're doing. We'll have all of their wood prepped, and we can hit the ground running with them. And that's one of the things Cade and Ray said about their experience, was that you could go in and start straight away. Which is brilliant. When I started there, we used on a Monday morning, it was chaos really in hindsight. We'd turn up, and sometimes we might not even know exactly how many people are coming in, and when they came in, we'd have to check, okay, what do you want to build? And they would have had a preliminary, when they were booking the course, they would have been like, whoever was doing the booking would have been like, what would you like to build? And you go, oh, this thing, and I want to do it on this time. And they're like, okay, cool, we'll figure out the details when you're here. And so Monday morning, we'd go into the wood room first thing, and we'd pick out the wood, which is a lovely experience, and it's great, but we would lose easily half of Monday if we, sometimes it'd be lunchtime before anyone actually starts anything. And that's just, it's just not really feasible, unfortunately. So we do the prep work ahead of time, and it saves a lot of blood pressure, if nothing else. Fair enough. Brad, I assume it's quite different as a school that's just recently started doing the teaching of electric building. Are you teaching one person at a time normally when you've been teaching? A couple of the students were one at a time, and another couple were father-son combo. So it was good to sort of have that bit of variation. Ideally, I'd have 4 on each day that I'm there. But we just sort of come in and we discuss what it is exactly. Well, we would have had a prior discussion about what they want to do, but then when they come in, because they might sign up and not come in for a month or so, and, we come in and okay, so what's your final idea? What do you want to do? We'll go pick the timbers and start there. And what I like to do with the students is just we'll get the body and top blanks ready, and then we'll get the necks ready, and then that way if I need to juggle tools around with students, because we're not a huge workshop, so if I need to juggle machinery around in the room and not have everyone trying to crowd in one space, I can go, okay, well you keep working on your neck bits, you keep working on your body bits, or if something happens, they want to change something, then we can just sort of work on the other piece while we're waiting for something new to come in or whatever. But otherwise we're pretty flexible, having that one-on-one or a couple on one tuition, we can get away with a fair bit more. And we don't have we don't necessarily have like an exact timeline, like you sign up and then you just come in on that one day and a week until we're finished. We're not restricted to have to worry about trying to make things happen within that 6 days, so we kind of just let people do things in their own time, and if something gets in the way, you can jump in and give them a hand, but otherwise the whole process really is quite flexible. Yeah, it's quite a different experience for the student and the teacher there. I mean, one thing I've always
noticed from teaching is sometimes I'll have the same thing that I'm doing over and over again, but with different groups. And one week it might be some experienced students, one week it might be 4 students, one week it might be 30. And you can do the same thing, but the way you do it is totally different, because the rate that the students progress, the materials you might have available, dictate sometimes how you can do some of that teaching.
Yeah.
So Sean, presumably you were talking about earlier on the different courses. So presumably if we just stick with the 5 and 6 day courses, it's people that have come because they want to build a guitar themselves, but not necessarily anything beyond that. Once they've done their one guitar, that's the experience. Or am I wrong there?
Not necessarily. A lot of people will also view it as kind of a testing the waters kind of a thing. We consider the 5 and 6 day courses to be almost more of an experience where you do build your guitar, but due to time constraints, we're not going to go into in depth of exactly why we do this and exactly, all of the different options and, even just troubleshooting. We keep that down to a minimum. But yeah, generally it'll be people who, just want to try it out, see if it's something they want to do. And that's a lot of it. It's also the 5 and 6 day courses are really, really popular as presents. We get an awful lot of generally wives buying it as, even big birthdays. So maybe not 30th, it's usually a little older, 40s, 50s, 60s birthdays. They usually will get a gift of a 5 or 6 day course. Not usually, but so that's quite a common one as well. And then we do get a decent amount of return customers from them. We do get people who do a 5 day course, they'll build whatever, and then they'll say, I quite enjoy this. I've got 2 weeks off here or around midterm or something like that. And they'll come back for a 2-week course. And like we've had 1 or 2 people who've come back for 3-month courses afterwards as well.
Great.
Yeah. And it's always nice to get the return customers as well, because you kind of build a rapport. We've got a guy in at the moment. He's on his 3rd course, I think. And I think he wants to just build up his collection. That's what he's there for.
Yeah, I love that there's so many different reasons to do it. If someone's returning, is there then a possibility that will they still make a full guitar, or will they do some of the more focused troubleshooting, trying things out and not worry about building a guitar, just hone their skills on trying to learn something but not worried about the finished product?
It depends. Most people would be coming in with the intention of finishing with a guitar, but you do get the odd couple of people. We had one guy, was it last week, I think? He came in for 5 days, but all he wanted to do was build necks, and he built 3 necks in the 5 days. But that was what he wanted to do, and he was a return student as well. And he was kind of saying that, bodies are fine, and he actually had a couple of bodies that he already had done, basically, but he wasn't worried about getting them even finished. He just wanted to build the necks, have them, necks carved, frets in. I don't even know if he did fretwork on them, because it just wasn't his goal, basically. And so, we do try to be very flexible based on that. For if somebody does want to do something specific, we'll try our best to cater to it. Sometimes it's not possible, but most of the time it is.
It's great.
Just had a thought about Daniel, about like the repeat people coming back for courses. And if you are someone that does want to make a lot of guitars and you don't have the space or the setup or the tools at home, it actually, rather than having to buy all the stuff you need, it could actually be quite cost effective to keep doing courses and use all of the machinery and tools there. And just sort of build your guitars that way, rather than trying to build up everything at home to do it that way. Something I hadn't considered before. You've sort of mentioned, people coming back to build up their collection, so to speak.
Now we have guys who do that usually. So after completing the 3-month course, we do have people have the option to come back for a kind of a rent a bench kind of a thing, and we do have guys will take advantage of that. I think we've got have a guy coming in next week for maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days, but he'll come in, he'll use our machines to prep up the wood and get them glued, because we've got that planer that's 12 grand or something worth of a planer, and it just does the work that would probably take a week to do at home. It does it in an hour, and that's really, really helpful, I think, for a lot of people. But even just troubleshooting is the other thing. Like this one guy, he'll come in probably with 2 or 3 guitars and go, "Where should I be going on this? Is there, just basically just a sanity check." And yeah, he's not the first one to do it, and he won't be the last one to do it.
Like it's like a maker space with teachers on hand to really work you through it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about YouTube. You can try to work out what you're doing wrong or how to do something right, but you still need to have your physical things to do it with. Whereas when you've got the teachers there and the instructors there, it's interesting, obviously, Sean, with that many students coming through, having such a great space, how different that might be to Brad, who was saying you have to move equipment around depending on what they're working on. Presumably, though, Brad, there are a lot of crossovers with some of the tools and stuff that you're working on with your electric guitars that Space already has for working on the acoustic builds.
Yeah, I think when we tooled up for doing the electrics, we only had to get, I think, plunge router, a few extra like drill, just longer drill bits and some specific Forstner bits, that sort of thing. What else did we get? We got the bobbin sander, the one that goes up and down, with the belt sander attachment on it. I think that was about all we had to get, really, aside from some templates. Everything else was already there. Like most of it was crossover, and we already had the bandsaw and the big belt sander and all that sort of stuff. All your fretwork and everything. Like bodies aside, you still got to do all the neck and the neck work, and everything is all the same. And aside from how it attaches to the body, but yeah, everything else is all there. So it's not a. It's easier to go from acoustic to build electrics, but if you were going from electrics to trying to build acoustics, you're probably up for a fair bit more coin doing that with all your side bending jigs and your actual framework and all that sort of stuff. There would have been a fair bit more cost in that.
And I'm intrigued by the different students that come in and how they work. And I love the fact that both of you are in a situation where you can be a bit more personalised to the person as well. What I want to just quickly do is a bit of deviation. Owen's put some questions in the chat about something that's just happened to him. So I want to share them. I'll read them out, and then maybe we can do a bit of feedback for him. And yeah, like if anyone else is watching in the future and got questions, there's links to everybody's Instagram and YouTube, etc. So you can always get in contact with any of us if you want to ask any follow-up questions. So here we go. Owen starts by saying, I did a laser cutting course at my maker's space this month to learn how to make my own router templates, and they asked about the one and only guitar I made. And after the chat, they asked me to consider teaching a guitar making course in the wood shop. And Owen's a qualified trainer at work, but doesn't actively train. Their space is fully set up, all machinery you could possibly need, but it would be an 8 or 10 week course with people who have limited experience. So I think making a body with a pre-made neck is the only way to do it practically. Well, there was another, has anyone done this stuff? And if so, what's the best way to source pre-made necks, low-cost hardware, etc.? Is it buy a kit and throw it away? I guess one thing that first makes me think about is if you were making something for the first time, can building the whole guitar be overwhelming? Do your students, for example, Sean, come in feeling a bit overwhelmed by the process? And if so, how do you make sure they're going to be nice and steady to be able to keep on time and get through the process to have a guitar built and not kind of get lost in the I've never done this before, I don't know how to use this tool kind of situation?
So we do get those guys not super often. We usually kind of knock a lot of that on the head, where you'll have guys who have been like, I've been thinking about this for forever and there's so much to do and I don't know how to do it and I don't know where to start. And we just kind of like, calm down. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to do it, we do. And it's kind of yeah, because it can be overwhelming. Like, there's a huge amount of little bits that go into a guitar, which we all know this. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the kind of the break it down approach. It's building a guitar is just many tiny easy things that together are one big difficult complex animal. But if you break it down, it's relatively easy. You start by drawing an outline of a neck, and that's easy. Building a neck is difficult, but you start by drawing it on, and then you start. Next step is you cut it out. Everyone can do this. That's not difficult, and each step is not difficult. It's the process as a whole is the difficult part, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think anyone should really be kind of a little bit overwhelmed by taking on a task like this. If they have no experience, yeah, it is a huge amount. But if you break it down, it's very easy. There's nothing particularly difficult. There's a couple of things that are, muscle memory and that, which, if you don't have the muscle memory, you're kind of in trouble with that, and trying to kind of transfer that knowledge is the difficult part, I find. But yeah, I'm just kind of looking at that problem, I guess. So 8 or 10 weeks, one night a week is a tough one. It depends on what the night is. If it's 2 hours a week, that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked about the overwhelmingness in relation to Owen's question is when I first started working on guitars, it was a transition for me from making sculptures and paintings. And what I wanted to do was customize guitars. So I wasn't necessarily interested in building a guitar from scratch. I was interested in how to change a guitar. And then from that, I was doing paintwork and sculpting to the bodies. But from that, I moved on to making bodies, because to me, making a neck seemed a bit of a waste of my time when what I wanted to do was all about the body. So I was buying in the necks and making the bodies. And maybe in the back of my mind, I was overwhelmed before I'd made a neck and realized that actually you can definitely make a neck. But that idea of, if you're teaching someone, one of the things about teaching to make a body is you can still teach them all the things that they've got at the makerspace. They're using templates, how to use those tools. And then you can teach the theory of how a neck connects, what you need to think about in the positioning of the neck and the bridge and the angles of the neck and all of those things that go with it. So if you're forced to, with your time limit, just to work on the bodies because of the equipment you've got and the time you've got, does that seem like a good way to do it? And is buying in things, cheap things, shortcuts, or is that actually going to cause problems?
I wouldn't think that it'll cause problems per se. I think one definite consideration is if you're buying in necks, or just in general, when you're doing the body, don't just do a general neck template. Don't buy a Telecaster template off the shelf and just put all the holes exactly where the template tells you to put them. You need to have a little bit of flexibility behind yourself. This is the approach that we take in Crimson, where we always build the neck first, or in this case, it would be, buy the neck or whatever. Otherwise, source the neck, and then you build the body to suit the neck. So we put in a neck pocket where we want to put it to the correct size for that neck, because I guess, we're building all the necks from scratch. People will sand them more or less, just depending on, if they've got a little bit of chip out. Some people will literally sand away half the neck to get rid of the chip out. And our necks do come out a little bit all over the place. Most of the time, they're not going to fit a standard telly neck pocket or whatever. So, yeah, if you're going that way, definitely have the neck first. And you can create a custom template quite easily for a neck pocket. You clamp the neck in place and you build the pocket around it with straight pieces of MDF. That'll give you a perfect neck pocket pretty much every time, and to whatever shape. I mean, you can do that for anything. If you've got a weird shaped pickup, you just put it in place or draw around it, stick pieces of MDF in a windmill pattern. Doing custom pockets like that is straightforward. So that, the question there is, do you want to tackle the neck, really? In my mind, the most important, and I'm thinking back to when I started as well, because my first build was exactly what they're suggesting. Is I bought a kit and I threw away the body and I made a new body for it. But I made the mistake of I followed everything on the kit body perfectly, as in I used it as a template, and I said, right, the pickups are exactly this far away, and from the front edge of the body, you know, the neck pocket goes back this much, and it's that wide, and all this. And I found from that I didn't learn an awful lot, and that guitar never intonated because, you know, I tried my best to take measurements from something else that, I mean, hell, that might not have intonated either. It was a very cheap kit. So, and in my head, it's important to understand the theory and the physics and everything behind and where the choices are. You know, pickup position doesn't matter particularly. Even neck pocket position. Technically, it doesn't really matter that much. You just want to look at, is there enough meat to hold the neck onto the body? Is there enough access to your upper frets? After that, realistically, it doesn't matter that much. And I think it's important to kind of, once you figure out what is important, where it goes, and, you know, how it interacts and that, and you kind of figure out where the word is gone. The bits you can't move, where they go, and everything else is extra. And, you know, you can draw whatever body shape you want, this or that. But yeah, if I was in their position, I would be buying pre-made fretboards, and I'd be making the neck, everything else after that, pre-slotted fretboards, because where the frets are, their relationship, that's important. You need to get that within a 0.5 millimeter. When I was starting off, that was probably for me the most overwhelming thing about building a neck was if I put the frets in the wrong place, it doesn't work. So I bought pre-made necks because, I was terrified of putting the frets in the wrong place until I kind of, you can buy jigs that will, or templates that you can either use in a table saw or like a radial arm saw or something like that. And they'll just put the frets exactly into whatever bit of wood you have. And they're quite good. And they generally, I don't think they're not that expensive, but you do have to have the right blade and the right saw to put the blade into, and that's a bit annoying.
I think that sort of course that Owen might be talking about, that it could become, is a little bit like the course that I may have wanted to do when I first did an evening class in guitar making, which turned out not to be right for me because it started off the first evening, at 2 hours of sharpening cabinet scrapers. And then the next week was, I think we were planing the neck blanks, but just to get them flat for the fretboard to match up with. And it was fine. Like lots of people on the course were there to make a guitar. And it was a course where you just signed up for 12 weeks. And after those 12 weeks, you signed up for another 12 weeks until you'd done enough weeks to finish your guitar. So people at all different stages. And I just didn't enjoy the way it was taught because I wanted to learn. I didn't want to make a guitar. I wanted to learn the theory of how a guitar worked and how it was made. So I wanted to see how a neck fitted into a guitar and how the frets were positioned and how to do that. But not necessarily, I didn't need to have a finished guitar at the end. But how you teach that, I'm not sure. So with what Owen's doing, I'm feeling like that's a course that needs to be advertised or sold in a way that students understand. They're not going there to make necessarily the full guitar. They're going there to learn how to do some of the processes and understand some of the theory behind it.
Yeah, I think in that situation, because you're saying 1 day a week, so at night, time's pretty limited. I'd be sticking to bringing in some necks, and where from, I don't know, I couldn't tell you, but probably do that and just focus on the fact that it's a body making course. What he needs to think about then is the finish, what finish they can apply to the body, or if they're taking it away and applying finish after, then it's something that's either dry rapid or they can take it away and do it themselves. But I would probably go back to that makerspace and say, look, can we offer two courses? Can we offer a neck making course and then a body making course? And then that way they can do the neck one prior and then bring that to their body making course. And then so they're building the body for the neck, or if they don't want to do that, then they wait until the body making course is available and the students come in and just have the pre-made neck good to go. You know, that to me seems like a good idea. Because, you know, like we always say, there's many ways to skin the cat, but you know, that's just another approach to maybe think about.
Yeah, it's definitely back to what Arran and Sean were saying earlier about having the amount of time you've got to teach, and realistically what you can do in it. So obviously, Sean, you've got your plan for your six days, but potentially
It
8
sounds
hours.
like if that maker space is set up with all the tools and equipment, then cutting out and shaping a body is probably a good use of the equipment they've got. And you know, to pitch it for people to be creative, that whatever body shape you want, you can do. You know, that's what I kind of like of the beauty of electric guitar. As long as the neck pocket and the fretboard and frets are the right height and the bridge is in the right spot, you know, you can go crazy with the shape as long as you're happy with the ergonomics of how it's going to feel for whatever you might come up with. So that could be an interesting pitch as well for people. And you know, the body shape and all those kind of things is a lot more forgiving than if you're stuck for time on a neck or make a mistake on a neck.
Yeah.
Owen's just said he's really glad he asked now, because these are seriously good ideas and experience being shared here. I'd say one thing I find with teaching, I think this is particularly been focused in my mind from the period when I was doing a lot of teaching with not just young people, but adults that were autistic, is that depending on their needs, it was often really important that at the start of every session I had with them, we outlined what we were doing and how we were going to do it and the sort of timing for it. And I'd like to not be specific with my timing. I'd just say this is the order we are doing things in, because otherwise some people get very hung up. We need to follow their exact timing I've talked about because of the needs they have. So I always try to set a bit of expectation at the beginning of what we're doing. And when you're planning a course, you really need to know what you can achieve from it. Because that was my disappointment with the course. Because again, it sounds a bit like what Owen's talking about. I signed up for a 12-week, 2-hour-a-week course. And the description of it was you would learn all about guitar making, from building the necks to making the bodies and all of that. But of course, no one could do that in 2-hour sessions, where the first 2 hours is just sharpening a cabinet scraper. It was very clear that this was going to be a long-term thing if you wanted to learn all those stages. So expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to tell them before. Like, I find it's also helpful to, you know, as you get to the end of the session, you sort of look at where they're at, what they've achieved, and you know where you plan to go. You know, you're letting them know the next week what you anticipate they'll be doing too. It just gives them something to think about while they're away and keep the pep in the step, and you know they're still excited throughout the week, not sort of going, oh, but what next, you know. And if they want to go and do some of their own research, by all means they can go do that and try and do a bit of prior learning. Doesn't hurt anyone.
So how do any of you go around with keeping students motivated? Like often just making something, they can see this is great, I'm making something, and they're excited. But if you get chip out, Sean, how do you make sure someone's not like, oh, what have I done? The guitar's over, I've got to start again, kind of thing?
Well, I usually just tell people that not every Telecaster leaves the Fender factory the exact same shape, and we'll sand it out, and that's that. Whether it's true or not, I have no real idea, and I imagine they're pretty tight tolerances, but at the same time, yeah. And it works. I mean, most of the time, and we do get some people who'll see, you know, 5 mil of a chip out, you know, a bad one, and they will just start freaking out a little bit and completely deflate, and you can see it in their face. And a couple of times I've had to say, look, give it to me, I'll sort it out, and if you can point out, you know, we'll go to someone else. If they can point out where the chip out was afterwards, fine, I'll listen to you, and you can be sad and mope around. But if they can't, then you're not allowed to be sad and mope around, and that's the end of that. And that kind of approach, funny enough, does work quite well, actually. And, you know, we'll go away, we'll sand it out, and you'll just go to someone else and go, can you show me where the chip out was on this guitar? And they'll go, no, it looks like a Telecaster. And you kind of turn to the other person and be like, I told you so. Now back to work. And I find that approach does work. And most obviously depends on the person. Some people are not quite going to want to be treated like a petulant child in that sense. But that kind of approach works. You know, things go wrong and they will go wrong. And I think it's important to kind of embrace that, take it in your stride and move forward. There's no point for us anyway, who we work on, you know, tight timescales. If a bit of wood chips out, you've got two options. You can bin the whole thing and start again, or you can fix it and move on. And next time you build a guitar, you know that, hey, this can happen. You know, if it's on a router table, take less of a bite, go a bit slower, or you know, whatever. There's loads of ways to help prevent chip out, but at the end of the day, it's gonna happen. And that happens to everyone.
I like that approach, but that's also that's really important point of this is why it happened. This is how you avoid it. Is such an important thing to put across too.
Yeah. And worst case scenario, we had a custom build in there a couple of years ago now, and you know, one of our master builders was building it on the router table, a piece of torrefied maple, and they had a massive thing of chip out. Now this guy has probably hundreds of hours on a router table. He knows how wood works. He's, you know, an amazing woodworker, and you know, a massive chunk of the neck just chipped out, and there was nothing he could do about that. And I tell them this, it's like, this guy, top of his game, really, you know, it happened to him. Of course, it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. And, you know, I think in that, annoyingly, that particular neck did have to be scrapped and start again because of where it chipped out. But most of the time, it's a case of you look at it and go, we're going to carve that away, or it's in the neck pocket, you'll never see it, or, you know, something like that. Or if it's on a body, just sand it out because the body shape doesn't matter. So...
Yeah, to paraphrase Scott, always your first build is not going to be the best build necessarily. Nope. So you have to have that expectation that it's going to get better and things might go wrong, especially the first time using a tool. Oh, and just to quickly go back to what Owen said, Mark is often talking about buying in necks through Amazon and places like that and how good they are when you buy them in. So there are places you can get them, but not necessarily that's the right approach. It might be easier for you to spend a day making a load. Oh, Rob's here. Rob's done some courses with you.
Yes, I remember Rob. Yeah, I remember trying to figure out how we route wires through his copper pipes and how we get the damn things into the guitar in the first place.
Rob, actually, back to something you said earlier about people buying it as presents and Arran saying going there to use the tools and things. I think Rob has said... I think it was Rob when we had Ray and Cade on, was saying that it's like it's cheaper than going on holiday, treating yourself to a course at Crimson or a similar price, and it's the same sort of thing. You're having a fun week, so why not?
Yeah, I mean the weather might not be as nice as, you know, Spain or something, but you do get a guitar at the end of it.
Yeah, there's something to be said though about walking through deep snow to get to a workshop to work on building something, then go back home through the snow. That sounds quite fun. Not that it snows all the time. Just off air, Sean was saying about the snow they've had recently there. Hey, Arran, do you have things you do to motivate students?
Oh, yeah. Look, my situation's a bit different. The kids that I'm teaching, they have to be there. They're not there necessarily by choice for a lot of subjects. But yeah, we've got core subjects and elective subjects, and as they move up through the years, you know, they're choosing things that they want to do as careers and pathways and things. But I think probably our focus is a lot of varied activities, that it's not just the same thing all the time. But probably the best link I could probably make is that they'll feel supported, that if they're struggling or if they make a mistake or they just don't want to be there, don't want to do it, it's just that to know that they're going to be supported, and you know, that you're looking for not. One of the things that we look at in schools is like growth. So you're not looking at everyone being A+ students, you know, everyone top of the class. It's like, you know, what's your starting point, and then how much growth can you have in a period of time, and then as a teacher, how can you get them to grow the most they can. So probably that sort of, you know, in terms of motivating when things are going wrong or people might be feeling a bit down and out, that's not working for them. It's probably that refocus that, all right, this is where we need to be for the next step, and this is what we can do to get there.
That's such a great point. I have this very vivid memory of, so I used to work in prisons as well, and quite often I'd work in the education wing in the prisons. And I remember once working with a group of people, and one of the people that was assisting me had said to someone, "Oh, that's really good what you're making." And he basically said what he thought of what he'd made, using words that I can't necessarily say here. But that made me think about exactly what you're talking about, growth. So then I just had a conversation with him about the fact that, yeah, definitely, if Picasso had made what he'd made, Picasso wouldn't be happy. But if you think about what this person had done the first week we'd gone in and what they were doing now, it had improved so much, and so much had come from it. So it's seeing that development and trying to picture that if you've come this far, how far you can get with what you're doing. And that sort of helped him a bit. But again, he didn't have a choice to be there. He was there, and we're all working along with something. I have lots of phrases I use as well within teaching art, which I think are quite relevant to anything when you're making, which is sometimes people get stuck with something, they're not happy with it. And I always say that with an artwork, one of the best things you can do is just leave it alone and come back to it like the following day or a bit later. And then you start to see it fresh, and you can possibly problem solve or see something different in it, or just having that little break helps you realize what you need to do next. So often I'll have other little jobs we can do. So we'll be in the middle of something, and if I can see a few people get a bit frustrated, we might all stop and do the other little job and then come back to the big job later, which is sort of how I work in my workshop. If I'm doing something and I notice I've done worked on something for an hour or so and it's not quite going as I want, I'll stop. I'll do another bit of the job, and then I'll come back later, because there's a good potential, knowing myself, that if it's not going very well and I'm not enjoying it, it will start going worse. Whereas if I come back after a cup of tea or after having done something I know I can do well, then potentially I'll come back at it fresh and it will just work.
That's an approach that works really well for me as well. If you get stuck in a rut, so for me personally, I mean, you get stuck in a rut, you just, drop tools, do something else, or like you say, make a cup of tea, whatever, and you can come back to it with kind of fresh eyes and go, right, how do we deal with this? Annoyingly, kind of in work, we don't get that opportunity because we're working to usually a fairly tight schedule and schedule of processes as well. If people need to kind of, there's always the opportunity of coffee, but if that 5-minute break doesn't work, we usually have to kind of figure out, right, how do we deal with this? Because we can't, you can't put it on a shelf for a week and come back to it later, which is, half the time, that's my approach of, right, this is not a today job, this is a later job. So if people really get stuck like that, it's usually a case of, okay, you work on, this other thing, the body or whatever, I will deal with this. And most of the time I've found for, when students are really getting stuck, is a lot of the time, if you just clean the work up a little bit, it makes a world of difference. So if they're doing inlay work, for example, if you just kind of get rid of the dust and just tidy up some of the edges, it looks 10 times better. You've done almost nothing. And the psychological effect of it is usually great. Or sometimes, inlays are a great example. If they're really struggling with them, I'll kind of take a chisel and I'll go, look, you got to use the chisel like this. Watch out for that. We're looking at this. And I'll just talk through what I'm doing as I'm doing one of them. And at the end of it, it should look hopefully quite clean and it should fit. And I'll go, look, it fits in like this, so we know that. It fits in like this, so we know this. And it usually kind of helps a little bit. It's that kind of deep breath, and it kind of takes I find it kind of takes the stresses and the pressures off of their own mind, and because they're too busy watching me do it to kind of stress out over how it's going for them, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's
sometimes it's not just the teaching, it's the leading them through the process as well, to say, like, look, we can do this, I can do this, and then you can do this. Like, it's that show tell, demonstrate, that methodology being brought back in. It's, you're building it, but we're building it, you're doing the work, but we're doing this together, and letting them know that, they're not alone in feeling frustrated, and like you say, we've all had those frustrations, and you remind them that, but giving them that little bit of that taste of the final product, and there's hope to dig out of that situation, is usually enough to have them go, oh yeah, no, I can see this, and they're happy to keep working through, to get to that product. And when they do, they're pretty stoked that they've fixed it, and they've seen the solutions.
I remember a story once of a friend of mine who was a sound engineer, and he worked at a place where people came in just to record kind of their own stuff. They'd come in, they'd record their own stuff just for their own personal use, not necessarily big bands they were working with. And someone came in once with an album worth of material they'd recorded, and they just wanted to put the vocals on the top. So in the vocal booth, recording, and as the sound engineer, he had to keep very nicely saying, I think we need to do that take again, or something's a bit wrong. And then this bloke came through and listened to what he'd recorded, and then took his recordings and just left, because he realized he just couldn't sing. He was so out of tune, and there was nothing they could do to help him get it right. But I feel like if I was there at that point, maybe there would have been, I don't know, a conversation we could have had about a way forward, because I think there's never a point where someone should think, I can't get past this point, there's no way forward. There's always a solution, even if the solution isn't an obvious one of, in that case with the singing, changing the key or something. If the solution was finding someone else to sing it with you, then that might have been a way around it. But yeah, it's sometimes when people get an idea in their head that they can't do something, it is trying to find the best way through, just to reassure them that loads of other people can do it, you can definitely do it.
You do get some people, though, that deflates them as well. That is the one thing that I found you got to watch out for. Just telling someone that, hey, everyone else can do it, then it turns into well, what's wrong with me? And it's always when you have to watch out for.
Yeah, maybe don't use that phrase for mine there. So before we sort of wind up, is there anything in particular that you all enjoy about teaching? What is it that makes you want to keep doing it?
Yeah, look, for me, I think for my job, we kind of like know what the end goal is for, pathways to school or the growth of kids, and taking them from kids to teenagers to young adults. And you've got a lot of different opportunities and ways to do that. And if over that time things aren't going well, or you need to change your approach, you've kind of got opportunities to do that. So it's kind of good that when I'm in the classroom, although we've got the same end goal that we're all trying to get, we can kind of work out our own way how we're going to get there. So yeah, for me, the variation and seeing the accomplishments that kids make. I mean, last night we had the year 12 graduation, so that the year 12s, the oldest kids who have just finished their high school now, and they're graduated. So a lot of those kids that I saw there, who are now young adults, like I started teaching them when they were 12-year-old kids that would cry when they got upset about something, and now seeing what they've achieved over that time is amazing. So I can kind of imagine from a guitar building point of view for Brad and Sean, that someone coming in where they're like, I've never built a guitar before, I don't know if I can do it, and then within a week coming home with something that they've created. I know my first guitar, or first two or three, like I still remember that feeling that you just look at it and think, oh, I actually can't believe that I've made that. And it might have taken me like, a year and a half for the first guitar, but it is that end goal and seeing the process of getting there.
I quite enjoy it's it feels like it's almost the little things. I really enjoy when like that, you've got someone who's maybe never worked with their hands before, and you can kind of go up to the bench and see what they're doing and go, you know what, that's really nice. And you've done a good job on this, and I quite like that. It's maybe it's a selfish thing, I don't know, but yeah, it's nice to just be like, yeah, you know what, you've done a good job. This is clean, everything is straight, everything is nice. It maybe it just kind of hits that OCD spot in my head where it's like, yes, everything is clean and orderly, and I enjoy this. Maybe it has nothing to do with guitars or guitar building, but I think that's, for me, that's one good one. And I like when people do kind of interesting things and strange things and challenges, I guess. I enjoy taking on a bit of a challenge and working with the student, trying to figure out, right, this is the end goal. How exactly do we get there? And how do we get there nicely and kind of elegantly? Because it's one thing to kind of fall over the finish line and scramble to it. It's something I find very, very satisfying when you kind of set out your methodology. It all just works, you know. It's like, yeah, I love it when a plan comes together. That's the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably for me
Yeah,
a good reason.
I just generally enjoy just sharing knowledge and helping people learn new skills. You know, it's a good feeling to give someone that knowledge and seeing them apply something that they hadn't previously done. You know, and that's not just necessarily, you know, with guitar building. That's just a good avenue for me to help me achieve that. You know, and then when they do get through the end, and you know the problem solving throughout, I'm a big fan of problem solving and trying to help fix things as we go along. But seeing that final product at the end and going, okay, this was the fruit of all your labor and the attention to detail and love that you put in it, and having something amazing come out, especially when you're looking at something going, geez, I wish that was coming home with me and not going home with you, because they've made something really good, and they surprise you as well, especially people when they haven't done it the first at all, and this is their first build, and then they knock something out and you're like, okay, wow, like that was actually really cool, and we together we helped guide you right to that end process. And yeah, it's a really good feeling when you get there.
Yeah, I've got to say that all of those things that all three of you said, I can definitely relate to. I used to love because I don't really do the arts education anymore, but I used to love it when people were surprised by what they'd made. Like, surprised either that they'd enjoyed doing it because I was in a situation where I was at a school, for example, and they'd been forced to do it, or they were surprised because they were doing something that they didn't think they could achieve and they had managed to achieve it, and knowing that you've been part of that process to support them through it. But what I really like now with the doing things on YouTube is when people leave comments saying that's helped me do what I wanted to do, help me fix the problem I've got, or help me go on and paint my guitar in this way. And then, because often it's just a comment, I'll ask them to share with me what they've made. And so seeing that someone's made something and that something I put out there and sort of I've got no control over how they interact with it has helped them is always very it's very affirming for what I'm doing. It makes me feel good because when I'm making guitars, I'm in a shed, literally in basically a shed all day long on my own. So knowing that in some way people are interacting with me without me being there is brilliant. So I wonder if any of you've got any sort of tips, if people like Owen in the chat are about to start off potentially teaching, any things that might be quite important for them to consider with their process, with either preparing to teach or while they're teaching.
I would say
plan it out. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say plan it out as well. So yeah, get a decent plan together and keep it simple. Like that's the other thing is don't start with sharpening tools because that's not guitar building at the end of the day. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an extremely integral part of guitar building, but it's not actually building a guitar. If you want to do a sharpening course, do a sharpening course. Maybe that should be a prerequisite for this other course, but that's a different story altogether. But at the end of the day, you don't need hand tools to build, especially not electric guitars. Acoustics are a different kettle of fish, but electrics, I mean, you can do that with a bandsaw and a router, and that's about it, really. Yeah, sorry, Brad.
I was just going to say, plan it out, do your rock drills beforehand, and figure out, what it is you want to do on what days, and give yourself that time frame. So then you can go through it and be flexible with your plan as well. And adjust that after you've done a couple of courses. Once one person's gone through, adjust your expectations of how long things may or may not take, and you know, if you have to extend your course or bring it back, then fine. But just always be prepared that, you know, some people are definitely going to work a hell of a lot faster than others. You know, some people you'll be watching them go and you're like, gee, you move slow, and other people you're like, oh, you've already done that. Okay. You're going, geez, what have I got to do next? Okay, yeah, I'll get this ready and let's go do the next bit. You know, I didn't expect you to have it done by then. So, you know, keeps you on your toes.
I would suggest as preparation for that other course, if it's 10 weeks over, 2 hours a week for 10 weeks, I'd suggest do it yourself. So you can condense it into a week. You know, you can do 2 hours, but I think it's important to not, you know, keep in mind that there is downtime between it. So do 2 hours on a Monday morning, tidy up everything, go have, you know, a cup of tea or whatever, come back and do another 2 hours. But it's that putting stuff away and taking it back out every time. I think you're going to be very surprised how much time you lose to that, because you're not going to get 20 hours of actual work time. You'll probably only get about maybe 15 or 17 or something about that, because, you know, 10 minutes at the start, 10 minutes at the end, that's going to add up really, really quick. And I think it's important to kind of figure out how much time you have to play with, because 2 hours isn't a huge amount of time either. And you're going to need to figure out ways and methods, because you can, you know, like in Crimson, we do the five-day build. That's 40 hours, and that's tight. So if you've only got 20, you are pushing it. You need to make sure you've got jigs made and setups, and you know, you've got methodology for every step. You definitely don't want to be stuck with okay, we've got to do this. How are we going to do it? You need to have the tools there. You need to know what you're doing, and yeah, then it's just doing it. You could definitely do, you know, a telly in 20 hours. I think you definitely could, but you're going to be pushing.
Yeah, throw some chit chat and a coffee break into there as well, or a smoke break if they're that way inclined, and yeah, you know, that 2 hours becomes one very quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are key things that are easy to forget. The actual practicalities of using a space and interacting with people, and people being late, and just tidying up.
And waiting for glue to dry, and knowing that you can't glue something up at the start, and then an hour later get to work on it.
Yeah. Planning around glue ups was a big thing with us, actually. Funny enough, as well, is you got to plan them. Either we glue our fretboards on hopefully before lunchtime, and then by the time you have lunch and cut out the body shape, you can probably work on the neck again.
Yep.
But if you glue it up at 3 o'clock, it's like, well, now you're in trouble, aren't you? So.
Cade mentioned that a bit about when he was on the course, like him or Ray said that they had to spray something. I think it was Ray, and he had up until a set point where if he crossed over that time, it's too late to spray. But that you had this amazing quick drying finish that you put on your guitars.
Yeah, so we use a flat. I don't actually know exactly what it is. So it's an acrylic polyurethane. I hate saying polyurethane because everyone immediately thinks of like thick fender finishes, which are polyester, very, very different. So it is, it's we call it's a flash coat is what we call it. So you spray it on, and pretty much and it's one coat. By the time you finish cleaning the gun, you can work on the guitar. So it's amazing. Now it does take 30 days to fully cure, so it's a little bit soft. Not soft, that's not the right word, but it'll dent and ding, and if you're roughhousing it, it's not going to hold up for the first month or so. But generally, we don't have people throwing their guitars around the room immediately after spraying. So long as you're any kind of careful, you're absolutely fine. But yeah, it's absolutely fabulous finish, really. And I mean, we use it on our production guitars as well, so it's not like it's a weak finish or anything. It's just really quick and really good. It's a fairly thin, it's just a thin open pore finish that we get on it, and works good.
That sounds great. I use a lot of nitro, and it's I love it for various reasons, but it does finish quite thin. So what I've just had is a guitar that I buffed it and polished it, and it was fine. And I thought, actually, I can do slightly better job on this little area. And I wore through some of the varnish. So now it's another month before I can finish the guitar.
Yep.
Let it happen.
We've had that before, and we've had guys. So on 3-month courses, some people will want a gloss finish, which is perfectly fine, and we get them to do a lot of the work, so the flat sanding and stuff. And every now and again, you'll get someone who's maybe 2 weeks into their finishing work, because like you were saying, you got to spray it, you got to let it dry, and then you can sand it, and then you spray it again, and rinse and repeat. And there was one guy in particular done this beautiful stain job. This really it took him over a day to do the thing. Sanded through the finish and took a little bit of the stain away. He had to spend about 2 days stripping the whole guitar back to bare wood. It was heartbreaking to watch. It turned out well, but it was painful.
I spent a couple of minutes yesterday looking at, or more than a couple of minutes, looking at the little patch that I'd sanded through, thinking, are there any components or something cool that I could just screw on the top there that would look awesome to cover it up? And, there wasn't. So it's back to the start almost. So look, we've just mentioned good things to think about if you're teaching is planning everything, thinking about differentiating for people that work at different speeds, etc., like that. Thinking about the time that you have to do it all in. I would say, Sean picked up on as well, the thing I didn't like about the course I did was starting with something that was really boring and not necessarily that useful. So I think that not just the pacing, but the order that you're doing things in to keep people focused. I mean, most people are going to want to be there, so it's a bit different. But try to sandwich the boring bits if you can. Not that there's anything boring about making guitars.
When you have to flatten the back of chisels, that's boring.
Providing a bit of motivation during sanding is probably the more difficult spot that I've sort of come across, and reminding them, working that end grain, it sucks, but it's well worth the effort to put in that extra hour or so if you have to, and doing it once and doing it right. That's the only real thing I've had to push people through.
Making sure you've got a good sander helps an awful lot with that. When I was at home, I used to have like a Makita, one of these handheld 30-40 pounds or whatever it was. When in Crimson we use Mercas, which are, I'm actually looking at one for my home workshop at the moment, and they're the wrong side of 400 pounds on a good day. But honestly, it's worth every penny. It's worth getting those stupidly expensive sanders because you save so much time.
Yeah, tools are important. I guess, especially if you're teaching, you don't want your student to be there struggling along with something when it's basically partly because of what you've supplied, either being under par or not being sharp, as we just discussed.
Yep, sharp tools are a must. If nothing else, a blunt chisel, that's going to go into a hand an awful lot quicker than a sharp chisel is, because someone's going to, have to really put some force behind it to work it. So safety is another annoying thing you do have to think about, because you can't quite have people leaving like pin cushions at the end of the day. It's not going to go down very well.
Sean, when you've got a group of people, do you ever have moments where people can walk around and look at each other's work, or is it just too dead on with the timing to have a chance to just relax and see what each other's doing?
Yeah, no, we have built a little bit of slack into the system. It's not a case of if you look up, we whack you on the back of the head or anything. It's not going to be. There is an awful lot of interaction between the students because they're in a confined space. I think I've set up the benches so that they're a meter away. There's a meter all around every bench, so they're pretty close. Maybe it's a bit more than a meter, but so there is an awful lot of looking in on what are you doing, because if nothing else, at the end of the day, there's usually 2 or 3 teachers, and there can be up maybe 7 or 8 students at a time, and we can we're doing stuff all the time, and sometimes that means the students aren't, but that's generally okay, because you don't want to work everyone like a slave master at the same time, because you don't get good results like that. I don't think. So yeah, you do, and especially on the 3-month course, those guys do interact an awful lot, and they, every now and again, someone will just be like, hey, look what I'm doing, and 3 of them will come over, and yeah. Sometimes you do have to go in and break up the crowds because someone over here is like, you're on a 5-day course, you're already behind, get back to work. But no, there's a lot of interaction. Everyone's always chatting amongst themselves. Someone's doing fretwork, they're probably bored out of their minds, so they're chatting with whoever's beside them or behind them or whatever.
I think that'd be part of the appeal of doing a course there like that, to see what other people are doing and finding out where they've come from and their experience in guitar building and making. I think that it's a really important part and would be part of the thing that I think they would remember when they're finished.
Yeah, we get a lot of people coming through the guitar, not necessarily just for myself, but through the acoustic course of the students that I've seen, they're doing it as part of a social thing, as well as the build. They've either identified for one way or another. They need to get out of the house, they need to do something, interact with some people. So maybe that's the only thing that gets them out of the house for that week, is they go in and they do the course, and they make some friends there, and they all love it. Everyone gets along, and there's always a lot of laughing and everything going on in there. So it's good. It's good with letting people have that time to interact. And as you say, you're seeing all the different walks of life coming together. People you wouldn't normally interact with. You got people that are retired and much younger people, and they're from different career paths and everything, and they're all coming together and still enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, and I've got to say that obviously everyone's different and works in different ways, but I always love it when you've got a space where people are interacting and have just having chats in the downtime or commenting on each other. It just feels like a more friendly, open space, and that always makes it more conducive to being a bit more creative, maybe a bit more relaxed with the work. Hey, so thank you everyone for being here. Sean, hopefully you'll be back again at some point. But if anyone wants to find out more about Sean, obviously I put links to Arran, Lutherie and Crimson in the description for the video and the podcast, but also he was on a past episode, and there's links to our past episodes in the description as well, and that's a bit more in depth about him. Arran, Brad and myself are on quite regularly, so if you go back through the past episodes, you'll see a lot of us. But again, links to all of us, and as well as Brad, we've got links to the school he teaches at. I just want to also thank everybody that has become members of the show, because the members, or of the channel even, the members pay a monthly fee. It's very low. I've tried to do extra things for them, so I'm doing weekly tours of my workshop focusing on different elements of it. I think next week I'm going to show you what I've been doing with my 3D printer, and also I've been doing a weekly sort of update on writing a book, because I've been writing a book about customizing guitars. Also, all of their money that you're giving is helping pay for all the streaming for this, so thank you again for that. One of the things you can do though to help the show, if you haven't got the money to spend, is just sharing the episodes and letting other people know about these episodes. So it's on YouTube if you're watching, but I put them out as an audio podcast, and that normally goes out the following day. So that should be available on all different podcast platforms, but that's new for us. We're only 20 odd episodes in. I'm saying it's new, 20 odd episodes. That's like 3 months. It's amazing. So it'd be great to get that out there and share that too. So Arran's just disappeared, but hopefully he's still there to hear. But I'll just say from all of us, thank you and goodbye.
Yep, thank you. I can hear,
us.
but can't see. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi.